What I'm about to tell you is something that has no explanation. It's the strangest thing that has ever happened to me or anyone I personally know. I work late hours at a dive bar about 30 minutes from my house. It's not really by choice, it's just how things are when you live out in a more rural area. There are not a ton of jobs close to home, so you take what you can get. The bar itself isn't anything special, but it's steady work and most nights are pretty uneventful. The night this all happened was no different. My shift had gone by without much happening, and after closing everything up, I got in my car and started the drive home. Most of the way back is nothing but a series of winding back roads. Hardly any traffic, barely any lights, barely any cars, barely anything, honestly. Just long stretches of curves cutting through woods and farmland. It's usually a pretty quiet drive, and honestly, I've always kind of liked it for that reason. Like a built-in detox where I have time to zone out or think about characters I met at the bar and interesting conversations I may have had with them. Not long into the drive, I remember thinking to myself how unusually foggy it was. I've driven those roads more times than I can count, but that night, visibility was worse than I'd seen in a while. I actually had to ease off the gas and take it slower because I could barely see more than a few car lengths ahead. Even flipping on my brights didn't help. It just made the fog glow and reflect back at me, almost like I was driving into a wall of white. It started pissing me off because I knew it would only add time to my trip, and I was exhausted. I was about halfway home when I noticed it. Through the fog, maybe a little off to the right side of the road, there was this faint yellow blinking light. At first, I figured it was just some kind of roadside marker or maybe a reflector, but as I kept driving, it didn't really get any closer or farther away. It just stayed there, blinking at a steady rhythm, like it was moving right along with me, keeping pace from somewhere deeper in the fog. The whole thing felt a little off. I couldn't tell how far away it actually was. It was like the fog was playing tricks on my depth perception. After about another minute of driving with that blinking light hovering in the exact same place, I started getting this weird feeling in my stomach. I couldn't even explain it to you. Something about it just didn't sit right with me. I decided to slow down a bit, thinking maybe if I let off the gas, the light would keep going and I'd get a better sense of what it actually was, or it would just continue onward and disappear entirely, and I wouldn't have to deal with it anymore. But as I eased down to almost a crawl, the light didn't change at all. It kept blinking at the same steady rhythm, still holding that same distance off to the side, like whatever it was that somehow matched my speed perfectly. That's when I really started to get spooked. I finally came to a full stop just to see if it would do the same, and sure enough, it stayed right there, blinking in the exact same spot with the same rhythm. I sat there for a second, trying to figure out what the hell I was looking at and debating whether I should just turn around or keep going. That's when it changed. The blinking didn't stop, but the light itself started getting brighter, like a small flame catching a sudden gust of wind and flaring up. It wasn't flashing faster. It was burning stronger with each pulse, like whatever it was had suddenly gotten more active. That was enough for me. I wasn't about to sit there and wait for whatever that was to get any closer or weirder. I reached down to shift into reverse so I could back up and turn around, but I realized the engine wasn't running. I swear to God, it was dead silent. I had no idea how that was even possible. The only way to kill the engine would have been touching the key, but I distinctly remember never doing that. Why the hell would I do that? At that point, my hands were shaking, and my hands never shake. I pour drinks all day, my hands can't shake. As I was desperately trying to start the car, I couldn't help but think that this thing outside my car had something to do with my engine, which of course wouldn't start. I tried the ignition again and again. The engine was completely dead. Meanwhile, that blinking yellow light kept burning brighter and brighter and brighter, almost like it was feeding off something. My pulse was racing at that point. I had no idea what the hell was going on, and there was no one around for miles. Not knowing what else to do, I reached for my phone, figuring maybe I could at least get some video of it or call for help. But as soon as I tapped the screen, nothing happened. Completely black, my phone had died. I knew for a fact I still had at least 20%. I had literally checked it back at the bar before I closed up, but now it was as dead as the engine. Before I could do anything else, the light suddenly flared to a blinding brightness, like an exploding star. I physically couldn't keep my eyes open. That's how bright it was. I threw my arms up in front of me and kept my eyes shut for 10 seconds at least, feeling the blaze of what was now a gigantic light bulb. And then, just like that, it was gone, like it had never been there in the first place. The fog was still thick, but there was nothing out there anymore. My heart was still pounding, but I instinctively reached for the ignition one more time, and this time, the engine turned over like normal. I didn't waste another second. I drove the rest of the way home with my eyes glued to the road, as if looking away for even a second would bring that awful light back, but nothing else happened that night. Nothing ever happened again, actually. I've told this story to just about everyone I know, my family, friends, even a couple regulars at the bar, but no one's had an explanation that sits right with me. And trust me, I've heard every theory you could think of. This happened a couple years back. I'm a long-haul truck driver. I've been doing this for years now, so I've gotten pretty used to the long stretches of nothing. This particular night, I was on my second-to-last delivery of a cross-state loop, just trying to knock it out so I could get home. The route had me cutting through one of those desert highways that barely get any traffic at night. No towns for miles, no gas stations, barely even any lights. Just a 2-lane road slicing through open desert under a sky full of stars. It's the kind of drive where you start to feel like you're the only person left on the planet. I was about an hour out from my next drop-off when I first noticed it. I glanced into one of my side mirrors and was kind of surprised to notice a dark SUV back there, trailing me. It wasn't riding my bumper or anything aggressive like that. It was actually keeping a pretty wide distance, but it was definitely following. No matter how fast or slow I went, it adjusted to match. For nearly 40 miles, it just hovered there in my mirrors. Always visible, always keeping that same strange gap. It never tried to speed up or pass, just sat back there like it was waiting for something. At first, I thought it was a driver who was afraid to pass me. Maybe they thought it was illegal or dangerous, but I cast that theory aside after driving through several passing zones. I guess it was possible they didn't know what a passing zone was, but I figured that was pretty implausible. As much as I was dying to know what was going on, I had a job to do. I couldn't afford to devote the whole night to figuring out what the guy behind me's problem was, so I tried to ignore him. As much as I tried, though, I couldn't help but glance at his car every so often. It was really starting to make me tick, which is something I rarely ever do. Around 2 a.m., I decided to pull off at a small roadside rest area. It wasn't a full truck stop or anything like that. Just a dirt lot with a few faded parking spaces and a little shed with a couple of vending machines. There were also no external lights in the whole lot except for one dim bulb flickering above the vending machines. I figured I'd stretch my legs for a minute, grab a soda, and more importantly, let whoever was behind me pass. But when I glanced back before shutting off the engine, I saw that SUV pull in too, parking way off in the far corner of the lot. At that point, whatever confusion or discomfort I was feeling became pure rage. Whoever was driving that SUV was about to get a piece of my mind. I aggressively stepped down from the cab and started making my way over to the car, not even trying to disguise my frustration. But as I was stomping my way over there, whoever was inside must have realized that I was about to confront them, because before I could even get close, the SUV's engine suddenly flared to life and they peeled out of the spot like they were running from the cops, kicking up a huge cloud of dust and gravel. As they sped past me, I tried to catch a glimpse of the jagoff who was behind the wheel, but the windows were tinted and I couldn't make anything out. I watched as the car got back on the highway, tires still screeching. Within seconds, it was gone. Just a flicker of red taillights that quickly receded into nothingness. Part of me was relieved. I wouldn't have to deal with that nuisance anymore, and I could finally go about my night in peace. But another part of me was deeply unsettled. I had basically confirmed to myself that whoever was driving that car had been following me for some unknown reason. And what's worse, they clearly didn't want me approaching their vehicle, so their intentions must have been hostile. As I was returning from the vending machines, which coincidentally were completely unstocked, so that had been a huge waste of time, I only then realized how tired the whole encounter made me. My energy was zapped, and the last thing I wanted to do was get back on the road. I figured I'd earned at least a short break after all that, just a quick nap, an hour or two to recharge before finishing the route in the morning. I did a quick walk around the rig. I made sure the cargo doors were still locked and everything was secured tight, then climbed back into the cab. I reclined my seat, cracked the window slightly to let some air in, and settled in for a bit of rest. The lot was dead quiet by that point, and for the first time all night, I actually started to relax. My logic was that even if that person did mean me harm, there's no way they'd turn their vehicle around just to continue harassing me. Even if they did want to come back, finding the lot again would be next to impossible. They'd have to search blindly in the middle of a pitch-black desert. The combination of my exhaustion and newfound comfort made falling asleep really easy. If I had to guess, I'd say I fell asleep that night in a matter of minutes. I should probably mention that I'm a really light sleeper. Like, really light. You kind of have to be in this line of work. Sleeping in sketchy roadside places so often builds a third eye, so to speak. If someone's messing with your rig while you're asleep, your entire livelihood could be at risk, not to mention your life. So yeah, the ability to wake up to even faint sounds could be the difference between job and no job, life and death. Maybe an hour after falling asleep, you guessed it, I was woken up by the faintest little noise, a light crunching sound like footsteps pressing into the loose gravel. Even though I was still groggy, I had enough sense to keep quiet. I cracked the corner of one of my window blinds to take a look outside, and sure enough, there were two figures standing near the rear wheels of my trailer. They were crouched down low, inspecting the lower latch mechanisms like they were trying to figure out how to open them without making too much noise. They were keeping pretty quiet, but I noticed one of them had a small flashlight, using it to signal back and forth to the other. I couldn't make out any faces, but it was clear as day what they were doing. I didn't have any weapon on me. I usually don't, but if it came down to it, I was fully prepared to defend my rig and load. That's my life. As I watched, one of the guys reached into a small bag and pulled out what looked like a pair of bolt cutters. That was it. Without even thinking, I slammed my palm down on the horn, sending the truck's air horn blaring. Their reaction was instant. Both men jumped like they'd been hit with a lightning bolt, and they scrambled back towards the roadside brush. Not even 10 seconds later, I saw headlights appear out of nowhere. It was that same SUV from earlier, this time roaring back into view with its lights still off, before whipping around and disappearing into the night again. I never even had time to step out of my cab before the whole thing was over. After things calmed down a bit, I called the police. Honestly, I was mostly just calling to report the incident and get it on record, but they insisted I stay put until a unit could get there to check things out. It took a while, but eventually 2 officers showed up and helped me inspect the truck. Sure enough, there were fresh pry marks along one of the lower lock arms on the back of my trailer, right where those guys had been messing around. Fortunately, they hadn't gotten it open. The officers told me they'd seen this kind of thing before. Cargo thieves. Apparently it's a lot more common along that corridor than most people realize. They figured the SUV had been following me for a while, waiting for the right time to strike. This remains the most unsettling thing that has ever happened to me. There's nothing better than a night drive, especially in the summer. Picture this. The warm summer breeze flowing through the open windows of a speeding car cutting through empty stretches of endless highway. Well, that's what it's like around my neck of the woods anyway. There aren't a lot of cars out on the highway at night, no cops either, so I essentially have free rein to drive how I please. And trust me, I take full advantage of that. My dad's BMW M3 definitely assists in that regard too. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a reckless driver or someone who operates a car at criminal speeds, but I do enjoy experiencing the full capabilities of German engineering from time to time. This night was one of those times. I was full-on joyriding, cruising along the highway without a care in the world, stereo turned off and passenger seat empty. My ears were focused not on music, but on 2 other things, the beautiful sounds of my car and the whip of the air around my face. Driving like this is one of the only things that makes me feel truly free. I'm not sure what came over me, but at one point I had this insatiable urge to pull off the highway and cut up some back roads where I could really appreciate the car's handling. It's like when you get a really strong urge to do something and you don't really know why, but you do know that you won't be able to sleep at night if you don't satisfy it. That's exactly what it was like. So I did exactly that. I pulled off at the next exit and started cutting through a network of back roads, weaving through whatever neighborhood I had landed in. The roads were narrow and filled with tight bends, exactly the kind of driving I was looking for. I let the car open up a bit, taking the turns with just enough speed to feel the tires grip and release. The streets were completely deserted. It was just me, the car, and the road. That is, until I spotted a flicker of light in the road up ahead and slammed on the brakes just in time to barely avoid smashing into it. Once I came to a stop, I finally got a clear look at what I had almost hit. It was a shopping cart, just sitting there in the middle of the road like someone had wheeled it out and left it. The way my headlights bounced off the metal bars must have been what caught my eye and made it look a lot more sudden and dramatic than it really was. Still, it completely threw me off. I mean, it's not exactly normal to find a random shopping cart sitting dead center in the middle of the back road at close to midnight. Against my better judgment, I put the car in park, turned on my hazards, and stepped out to take a closer look. I probably should have just kept driving, but my curiosity got the better of me. The whole thing just felt so random and out of place that I had this weird need to make sense of it. The night air hit me right away, warm but a little buggy, and the only sound was my cooling engine making the classic BMW ticking sound. I walked up to the cart, unsure of what I'd find inside. Groceries, maybe? No, that was ridiculous. I internally scolded myself for letting such a dumb thought even enter my brain. I peered inside the cart and realized it was completely empty, just an ordinary metal shopping cart sitting in the middle of the road. I stood there for a few seconds, but when it became clear there was nothing unusual about the cart itself, I turned to head back toward my car. That's when I saw out of the corner of my eye, two dark figures suddenly broke out from the farmland beside the road. They were sprinting full speed, coming straight toward me. It took my brain a second to even process what I was seeing, but in that moment, it was life or death. My options were either act or die. I bolted back to my car and basically punched the start button. The car came to life as those figures made it to my car window. One of them stopped a few feet from my car, but the other one sprinted directly into my passenger side door, coming to a halt with a deafening thump. He didn't even flinch. It was as if my car were invisible. That's how fast he had been running. He didn't even brace himself for the impact. The two of us locked eyes, and all the confidence I just had was instantly gone. I was frozen. He stared at me with two beady, bloodshot eyes. His clothes were torn, like he'd been running through thick brush or barbed wire, and his hair was messy and wet. His face was smeared with something dark, dirt or blood or maybe both. He had this unsettling, vacant expression on his face that wasn't exactly a scowl, but wasn't exactly a smile either. I've never been more terrified in my entire life. It was bad. There was blood spurting from somewhere on his body, but he didn't seem to care or even notice. He must have realized I wasn't going anywhere, because he started fumbling with the door handle, trying to pry the door open. That's what did it for me. I snapped back to reality, maneuvered the car around the shopping cart, and sped out of there. I was beyond conflicted the whole drive home. Not only was I still shaken up and scared, but part of me also felt like that person needed help for his wounds and wasn't going to get it. I debated going back to see if he needed help, but ultimately decided against it. Instead, I reported the incident to the police while still driving, and they said they'd send someone over to the spot I described to check it out. When I finally made it back home, I parked in the driveway and got out to inspect the car. I needed to know how bad the damage was. That's when I noticed there was blood spattered across the entire passenger side door, way more than I had expected. It was streaked along the side mirror, smeared across the handle, even dotting part of the rear quarter panel. There was also a slight dent near the center of the door, just barely noticeable if you weren't looking for it. The amount of blood, though, that's what really got to me. It was far more than I would have thought from that brief impact. It was an inhuman amount of blood. The next morning, my dad took one look at the car and completely lost it. He didn't even give me a chance to explain before he started going off, yelling about how irresponsible I was, how I should have never taken the car out that late, and how much it was going to cost to fix the paint and the dent. I kept trying to tell him that it wasn't my fault, that something happened out there that I couldn't have possibly predicted, but he wasn't having it. To him, all he saw was his car covered in blood with a dented door, and that was enough. I may have hit a deer for all he cared. He eventually did come around to what had happened, and he was actually pretty sympathetic, but not until after I got the car cleaned up. And let's just say that was one of the last times he let me go joyriding after dark. I'm pretty sure I can explain everything that happened. Those people, probably homeless, had tried to lure some unsuspecting soul out of their car with a shopping cart. I had been that unsuspecting soul that night. They just hadn't been fast or stealthy enough to get the jump on me before I could get out of there. I never heard back from the police, but I wasn't really expecting to. Part of me feels like I shouldn't care, but I really hate thinking an impact with my car might have ended someone's life that night.